Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Hold on to the edge of your seats because you are in for quite the ride. It's time for the Granada Forum Radio Show. Right now, live on air with your host, Granada, Wendy.
Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Granada Forum Radio program. Tonight is the 25th, by the way, of May, and it has gone fast, to say the least.
Hello.
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 Hey, Al.
We have your guest, guys.
We've got you on, so no problem.
Good evening.
Hey,
Good evening.
We'll get Ed on in at about a half an hour. We're just going to fart around here for the next 30 minutes until then. So just hang tight.
Do announcements and stuff like that.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Granada Forum Radio program. It is the 25th of May. We've got a few people on, and it's going to be fun. Our special guest tonight at 7:30 is G. Edward Griffin. And that's G. Edward Griffin. He wrote the famous book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's documented on every page. That's why it's so famous. And also, to his website, I believe, is...
He's got two. He's got
RealityZone.com
and FreedomForceInternational.org.
FreedomInternational.org. Okay, and RealityZone.com.
FreedomForceInternational.org.
FreedomForceInternational.org. Okay.
Right.
All right, cool. And so we have a wonderful guest, and to him we'll call him at 7:30. I'm just going to do a quick few announcements, then we'll take some. I know John wants to make an announcement, and maybe I know we're going to end up talking about why that there might be rumors of Hillary being arrested. So we'll get into the stuff right now. Real quick, by the way, this is Revolution Radio. And we are the #1 commercial-free, listener-supported Internet talk radio station in the world. We are located at freedomslips.com. That's freedomslips.com. And, Nick, what is the other one? It's radio.com?
No, it's revolution.radio.
Okay, it's revolution.radio. Revolution.radio. Okay, thank you very much. And you can hear us on that at revolution.radio. So we want to say that, too. By the way, if you want to check out the homepage and if you want to leave equivalent to a cup of coffee as a donation, we appreciate to keep the information on the air. Also, too, you might want to check out Nighthawk's. He has a special thing for like a donation of $100. He'll give you like 3,500 seeds and how to grow, store, and etc. everything else under the sun on how to do that. So it's very well worth it, and he gives a tremendous amount of information. So we'd like to thank Mr. Nighthawk for that. My co-host guest is Nick Pearson.
Hey.
And I have a wonderful producer who we cannot live without, Mr. Richard Kane.
Hi there. You lived without me last week.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Well, I was just about to thank, by the way, we want to have a special thanks last week for Mr.
Painter. Thank you, Painter.
Matt Painter. And we can't thank him enough for stepping in and helping us out. And we, because of that, both me and Nick have been talking about A and B, C backups just in case something ever happens. So, this really actually won't supposedly happen again.
I do think Nick actually has contact with Revolution Studio A, and he could have actually hosted the show, but he doesn't have a Skype phone number. So, Nick,
okay.
If Nick did get a Skype phone number, he could actually host.
All right, I'll have to look into that because I didn't realize that I did have a contact to Revolution Radio.
Well, I'm pretty sure I'll slide it in through the Skype here, and then you'll know if it's contact numbers or not.
Yeah, and maybe we'll have to do we'll do a test run one day or something. We'll have some fun with that off the show sometime. Cool. So we've trying to work on it and make sure that does not happen again. And we want to thank our listening audience for all their support. And we came out about 45 minutes after it all happened last week. So we are sorry, but we did like to thank Deborah Tavares for hanging in on there with us. It was quite a show, to say the least. Her website, by the way, is www.stopthecrime.net. That's www.stopthecrime.net. And real quick, so we got that out of the way. Okay, and I got a few more announcements, and we're going to do some talking here. By the way, the 46th annual Cancel Control, which is at the Glendale Hilton in California. That's the Glendale Hilton Hotel in California. and that's September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And it's all alternative therapies to cancer. So if you go to cancercontrolsociety.com, that's www.cancercontrolsociety.com, www.cancercontrolsociety.com. Their phone number is 323-663-7801. That's 323-663-7801. That's for all the alternative therapies to cancer. So it's unbelievable. Books, tapes for many, many years. And these are the guys who know professional and to the general public just do so much and help people get well with sometimes the problems that they might occur in their life. So check them out. And they do a doctor symposium on Tuesday, and then they go to cancer. They go to clinics in Wednesday to show people how to do that. So it's very nice. So check them out. Please do. By the way, too, on the 15th, me, Nick, and Cousin Bob will be live in I believe Liberty as well. We'll be live on the 15th of June. We will be live at the Alien Con in Pasadena. And we're looking forward to that. We're going to be doing a live show there and talking to many guests on ufology, so it's going to be so much fun there. And that's on the 15th in Pasadena, California. AlienCon.com. That's AlienCon.com. Check that out. We'll be there live on the 15th. Also, too, we will be at the National Health Solutions Expo at 5855 1st Century Boulevard. That's West Century Boulevard in Los Angeles, California, 90045 at the LA Marriott. This is going to be at the LAX Marriott, The phone number to talk to this wonderful lady is 562-212-3479. That's 562 area code 212-3479. We will be there Friday night with a live show, as well as we're filming it, believe it or not, and DVDing it and all that good stuff like that. It's going to be a long time in coming for that one. We haven't done that in a while. But we're going to be at the National Health Solutions Expo at the LAX Marriott, and that will be September 22nd through the 23rd. September 22nd through the 23rd. We're looking forward to that one. Okay, real quick, too, check out JordanMaxwellShow.com. That's the JordanMaxwellShow.com. Great for books and tapes and information. And all kinds of good stuff there. And also to drinkyourvitamins.com, Olalola. We recommend them very highly. That's drinkyourvitamins.com. If you don't believe me, check out their website. And they have a phenomenal, if you just drink their packet every day, but they do have probably one of the best B12 vitamins on the market. That's no lie. And that's for B12. And it's very, very reasonable. So drinkyourvitamins.com, Olalola. I know Sprouts will... various vitamin stores carry them, as well as Whole Foods, I believe. So check them out and others. All right. So we're done with announcements real quick, too. And real quick, I probably should real quick throw this in. Check out George Webb, georgewebb.com. Great stuff coming from George Webb. Crowdsource the Truth. That's Jason Goodman, crowdsourcethetruth.com. Also various programs on Revolution as well. Our buddy Bill Grant, which I got to try to hook up with him and get on with him. He's on Saturday nights, I believe, on Studio B or Studio A, one of them now. And he's there. Check him out. Good stuff for Bill. And check out Alex Jones, Infowars.com. That's Infowars.com. All kinds of stuff coming out of Alex. And Tori Cassidy, www.projectcamelot.org. That's www.projectcamelot.org. Check her out. Good stuff always with her. And we always mention a few different websites just to give people a feel, because we know we find all kinds of information on these websites, and so it makes it interesting. I'd like to say a good hello to my good buddy out there, Brian Hall. Check out his website, theconspiracycon.com. That's conspiracycon.com. Spent many weekends with Brian up at the Conspiracy Con. His website is absolutely phenomenal, and the people that he had for many, many years is just phenomenal. That's Brian Hall. Check him out at conspiracycon.com. That's conspiracycon.com. Memorial Day weekend, so he was just number one. I think one day, me and Brian will end up being back in doing something, but he's a fantastic guy, and I want to say hello to the gentleman. Love him very much. So we're going to take some... John, are you there on the line with us? John? Okay. Nick, is there something you might want to say?
I want to say something.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Bob.
We were talking about John's favorite subject of North Korea. Now, I saw a video of Trump seemed like he was, I don't know about MK Ultra. He looks like he's reading. He's not natural. Okay, he's not natural when he's saying it. But he said he was going to, we're sorry, we have to back out. Okay, now, Wendy, you heard something new. That's
it was on 1070. It was on KNX 1070 News All the Time, right? They said that the phone calls got put back in through both countries. Believe me. And they both said that they think on June, is it the 12th or the 15th, that they believe that this is going to happen. So I think talks are back on. Both countries called. So I think they both want it. So that's what I heard on 1070. And I heard this in the afternoon, probably a little after 2 maybe. Okay, thank you, John. Nick, what else? I know that we were mentioning at the top of the hour before we got on that the crimes that is come out against not against the president, but the president who Hillary and Obama and all the crooked cookies. They did this before the election and after the election, and this is now to the forefront that hopefully people will be arrested. And you heard that maybe Hillary?
Well, there's so far from what I just did a little background on it here just before we came on the show.
Yeah.
There's 19 congressmen who are signing on to get Hillary Clinton arrested and charged for all the crimes that she committed.
How wonderful is that?
Well, hopefully they're still going to need more, but hopefully that it'll start a movement among some of the spineless Republicans that are in there and get them on board, or their constituents might just vote them out of office during the midterms.
Right.
So I hope this isn't just a dog and pony show so that they can get votes during the midterm elections and retain their seats. I hope they're actually going for it.
Right. I hear you.
Clinton needs to be put in jail. The fact that James Comey got on national TV, listed out all her crimes.
Right.
And then said, okay, but we're not going to prosecute. And neither, was the Attorney General Loretta Lynch at the time. But now we got Jeff Sessions and sitting in the chair of the Attorney General, and those crimes are still there. They haven't gone away. They're not going anywhere. Why is Jeff Sessions sitting on his hands like he always does? That guy has got to be one of the most useless damn people on the planet to hold that office. I mean, first thing he did when he got into to be the Attorney General, I recused myself, from everything practically.
Yeah.
So I mean,
I've never heard of such. I never heard of such that.
Yeah, it's pointless having the guy there.
Yeah. I think he should step down, and but I think this is why they had to get a second prosecution team in there to start going after some of these people, Nick.
Yeah. I don't think Sessions should step down. I think he should be fired.
I know. I'm just being, kind of nice. I mean, just because, but I agree. I agree.
Hopefully.
I'm not the only one saying it, but yeah.
Hopefully we can get some more people on board, and they'll actually file criminal indictment against Hillary Clinton and put her up on trial.
Right.
But I'm not going to hold my breath. She's probably holding so much information on all these Congress people that they're scared to even approach the subject of it because she'll take them down with them.
There you go.
They should also fire Rosenstein.
Well, I think Rosenstein's
there's a bunch of them. There's Rosenstein, and there's some guy named Halper or Help thing, and then there's another guy. There's another one starts with an S. I mean, there's quite a few of these guys.
Yeah, it runs pretty deep on how many.
It runs pretty deep.
Have to get rid of. So I mean, if Trump really wants to start arranging, I mean, I know he's got to keep the relationship with the other politicians open, because otherwise absolutely nothing will get done. They'll block everything he does just out of spite. But if he really wants to start impressing people, and I know he's probably playing way ahead of the game from what I'm thinking even, but he really needs to fire some of these people and not replace them with one of their well-known replacements that that's going to come in and fill the seat and just keep doing what keep the status quo going. He's got to get somebody from the outside in there, somebody who doesn't have an attachment to Washington and somebody who really wants to do that job the way it's supposed to be done. But right now I don't see it happening. But like I said, it would be a really great thing if we actually saw Hillary Clinton brought up on charges and indicted. And then she'll probably come up with the, maybe I did, maybe I didn't smash up my hard drives and delete all those emails. But it depends on what your definition of is. Does somebody got a blue dress I can put on? Please, I'm the victim here. She'll start playing those cards. And
I agree with you, Nick.
Yeah, so it's ridiculous. One of the other things that we were talking about before we came on the air was I don't know how many people in our audience are familiar with Tommy Robinson, but he's an activist over in England, very much against the immigration policies that they got there with flooding the England with the Muslim immigrants that are over there who are essentially they're causing a lot of problems. I can't say they all are, but there's a good majority of them that are. So Tommy Robinson has been very active in it, and so he was outside a courthouse today shooting some video, and he was arrested, tried, convicted, and sentenced to 13 months in jail in an hour.
Wait a minute, Nick. Wait a minute. This guy was arrested.
He
was tried, convicted within 1 hour. I mean, come on. Any decent barrister in London is going to say, "Wait a minute."
But you also got to remember something. This is what a lot of people don't seem to get. I mean, I hear a lot of these people from England complaining that our free speech is being curtailed because we're no longer allowed to insult Islam or have opinions in that direction or anything. And I said this a while back when Piers Morgan was jumping on this bandwagon of gun control. They are not citizens. These aren't British people are not citizens. They are subjects. They are subject to the crown. They don't
but
have
wait a
those
second,
rights.
Nick. I understand that, but I hate to say this, but I could be wrong. But I understand what you're saying. But they do have under the British Crown, they have right to representation and thing. He was picked up within an hour, Nick, and you're telling me he was tried within that hour and sentenced to 13 months. There's something going on there. That's not even.
Yeah, the British government hates this guy. They can't stand this guy because he's actually out there being a patriot for England and standing up against the immigration of basically people that are coming in that they don't even know who they are. Number one, they're children. I don't consider 18 to 21-year-olds to be children.
Right.
They're radicalized Muslims, some of them. They're coming in and they're causing problems. They're demanding Sharia law in England. And this is, I get granted, this is England's problem. Okay, they really do got to deal with it. They're going to have to
solve it, right?
But the thing about it is that Tommy Robinson is a guy out there who's trying to stand up for England, and the English government is putting him in jail for it.
I gotta believe, Nick. I gotta believe that there's going to be a few barristers, because that's what they call themselves. I believe in England. Yeah,
but again, you got to remember they're all under the British Crown.
They are under British Crown, but I'm going to tell you something. There's going to be a few barristers that will step forward. I've got to believe there'll be a few barristers going to step forward, lawyers, Tony,
well, maybe.
They're going to step forward and say, come on, we're not saying maybe certain things, but within 1 hour, that's not even due process. And also, too, this can really cause a backlash against the Crown.
Well, but you got to remember, the British Crown is supposed to be restrained by the Magna Carta that was signed back in the 1200s. Or what year it was signed? I'm going off the top of my head here. So they're supposed to have been restrained by the Magna Carta. Some of the rights, a lot of the rights that that were held in the monarchy were reverted back to the people. But when it comes right down to it, I don't see that happening, because I see the news stories that I've been reading. The British people are getting stomped on all the time by their own government, and Tommy Robinson's just the latest casualty that's getting nailed, by the censorship that's going on there. And they don't. Where's our free speech? Guess what? You don't have any. And they're trying to pull this in America. What's
and we're
sad
fighting
about
it. I know we're fighting it. I know we're speaking out against it.
Yeah. Well, the sad part is that mainstream media is kind of going along with it, unless it affects them personally. You know, they want to shut shows like ours, InfoWars, the Ren's program, all these other alternative radio sites. They want to shut them down.
Right. I know. What else? But I guarantee you, if they shut Alex down, everybody else, including us, will follow. Go ahead, John. Did you want to say something?
Yes, Nick and Wendy, you have to understand that in London, Stan, that most of the officials are now Muslim. The mayor is a Muslim, and so are members of the judicial division. So it's basically a cinch for them to prosecute a person in such a short duration of time. It's almost like a kangaroo court, except...
Well, it is a kangaroo court. And I got to go over but London is not the country of England. That's it's one thing. But John,
it's a municipality, and we're ruled by the Muslims right now. Yeah.
Well, let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you something. This could cause, and I'm just being honest with this, they could have a revolution over this now. This is very much the start of the match, lighting of the torch. I mean, whatever you want to call it, over there. And I'm just being honest now.
Well, that's
because you now have a political prisoner. You now have a political prisoner in a kangaroo court for absolutism, and you know what? That's just not going to fly well. They are. I'm just being honest with you.
Well, it depends. It depends on how many people are going to get fired up.
I think it's.
But you
go ahead.
You have to understand that in England, you do not have a Second Amendment. Very few of the subjects have the right to bear arms or own or possess any type of firearm whatsoever, or ammunition for that matter.
Yeah,
so it's very doubtful and rather unlikely that any revolution, as you alluded to, will take place.
Well, listen to me. I think the thing about this, and John, just listen to me. When I talk about a revolution, it's not always just physical with the guns as it is mental. If the people take to the streets, they're going to undo the people who are in London doing this to Thomas. What's his name?
Tommy Robinson.
Tommy Robinson. What I'm trying to say is that they will. Vote for these people out. That this is start of something in a not just a picking up weapons. It's not just about picking up weapons, but it's also about uniting England. This could unite the country of England. This would force certain hands, John, that they might not want. But in the end, John, you listen to me, because I don't believe that this one guy, Tommy Robinson, who's unfortunately now a political prisoner, absolutely a political prisoner, physically, mentally, and spiritually, that this will unite a country against wrongfulness, and this is definitely wrongfulness. And you know something, John. It will. This is the start of the candle, the start of the light. I understand the people in the country have shotguns because they hunt or something, or they don't like to talk about it, but they do. But I believe that this will be the start of something, but it'll be interesting to see where this is going to go now, John.
Well, you also got to remember one thing too. Those people that do have access to firearms, they're all registered.
Of course, I know.
So their government knows who's got what.
Of course.
If something really does kick off here, if this is a spark that actually lights something off, the government's going to know where to go, and they're going to start confiscating them. They already showed they have no respect for people's right of self-defense in England anyway, when they already forced the turnover of all their people's handguns especially. God forbid you ever have a handgun.
All right.
I'd like to get somebody on the phone from England and actually discuss that with them sometime.
I think we're going to have to. We're going to have to do some more research on these subjects and on these countries. Yeah.
It was funny one time too, because when I was over in Italy working on the theater in a cruise ship, and some of the people we were working with came from England, and I ran into some of them out at a pizza place. And they asked me about the Second Amendment. Said, "Do you believe in the Second Amendment?" I said, "Absolutely." And they, "Well, how many guns do you own?" And I told them at the time, I said, I got like 14. Well, why? Because I can.
That's right.
Why.
Because I can. That's why. That's right. Because I can. I hear you. Good show. Touche. Touche.
Right.
And you know what? Let me tell you something, Nick. Those people right now who probably, fortunately, and that was some years ago, but look, times have changed in their country, and now they're now forced to mentally stand up for Tommy. Is it Jackson?
Robinson.
Tommy Robinson.
We'll
stand up for him. So it's going to be extremely interesting. What time is it by chance? We don't have to call Griffin.
It's 9:40. We need to call.
We got to call him. We got to call the man of the hour. We got into heated discussion. There you go. Never a dull moment here at the Granada Forum. There you go. Okay. Here we go.
And we also have to call back Al too. Okay.
Okay.
You can't come to the phone right now, so please call back. Thank you.
We will.
Maybe we will. Maybe we won't.
There you go. Okay.
Hey, Rich, I think you need to try the other number.
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, hold on. I was muted. That was the number that you guys gave me.
Yeah. Okay, and no answer?
Hold on here. I'll try it again.
Thank you.
I mean, you guys are late calling. What time did you guys tell them that you were going to call?
Like 7:30, so I think we're like maybe 10 minutes late, maybe.
Yeah, so if I was waiting and I was waiting
for
more than 5 minutes, I say, "Oh, okay, see you later."
Do you have another number by chance?
Yeah. Rich, try the other number that I just sent to you in the chat.
Enter remote access code.
That was the number that I just called. Hello?
Yeah, Rich.
Okay.
Yeah, hold on, Rich.
I think Nick's sending you another number.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Rich, you see the number that I sent to you on the chat?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Try that one instead of the other number that you were doing.
Okay, I'll try that one again because that was the number I tried already, but I'll try it again.
Oh, that's not what I'm seeing.
Well, that's what it's supposed to be up there.
Okay. Oh, it keeps coming up as a different number. Hold on.
I got a different number also for him. I'll try it. Maybe it's, how Skype is. I have no idea.
Yeah, right. Sure. Yeah, just try a couple of whatever works.
I got this other number for him too.
Great.
Let's see if this one works.
Had him on before, so.
Hello?
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
This is Wendy and Nick with Revolution Radio for the Granada Forum radio program. We were wondering if you'd like to talk to us.
Well, yeah, I was more or less expecting the call, so...
Cool. Right. Okay, great. Hey, Mr. Griffin, can you give out some of your websites that you want to give out and how people get in touch with you and get your books and tapes?
Well, sure, I'd be happy to do that. You bet.
Great.
Yeah. Are you on the air now?
Yeah, we're on the air right now. But do you need a minute?
Oh, yeah. No, I don't need a minute. I didn't realize you were on the air. Okay. Well, that's a nice way to begin, Wendy. I appreciate that very much. Well, let's see. Probably the most interesting, I'll start with the least interesting and work up to the crescendo, I guess.
Okay.
The least interesting is our commercial site. And it's pretty interesting in itself, but that's where we sell books and recordings and information, have nothing to sell but, that kind of stuff. That's where all my books are and our videos. We have about 100 different items there. And that's called the Reality Zone. It's realityzone.com. So anybody is interested in, what we're reading and what we think is good, that's where you'll find it at realityzone.com. And then we have a think tank operation, which we're just dealing with ideas. So we don't even have books to sell there, just ideas. We're trying to, putting it mildly, we're trying to save the world. And we call that freedomforceinternational.org. And that's where we theorize about what is the nature of liberty and what's the nature of our opponent. We think it's a battle between collectivism and individualism, which are strange words to many people, but that's really what it is. And we talk a lot about that, and the fact that all these things that we're so worried about, like communism and fascism and Nazism and socialism, those are all merely variants of the same thing, which is collectivism. And if you're going to fight that, you have to know what the opposite is. Well, the opposite is individualism. So we get into some pretty heady stuff, but we think that kind of information and that kind of thinking is necessary if we're going to conduct a serious battle against these forces that are taking down our liberties right now. And so you find all of that, and the rationale as to not only what we're fighting, but how to do it, what will work and what will not work. And you'll find all of that at freedomforceinternational.org. And then finally, we have a pair of sites right now that to deal with how we reach out to the larger group of people that maybe aren't so interested in all of this theorizing that we're doing, but they want to get out there and do some work and to make some changes. And so we have that kind of a movement going as well. And the most interesting, I think, right now is called the Red Pill Expo, which is coming up in June. Actually, it's just about four and a half weeks away now. It's going to be held in Spokane, Washington. It's a big event. People are coming from all over the world. Last year we had it in Montana, Bozeman, Montana, of all places. And we thought there'd be, maybe a couple hundred people would show up. 600 people came from all over the world, all over the United States. So we're having the second one this year in Spokane. We don't know how many people are going to be there, but we're ready for over 1,000. We don't know, but we're building that right now. And this is a place where, everybody's familiar with the idea of the red pill. Take the red pill, break out of the matrix, see life the way it really is, and get out of the illusions. That applies to so much that's in our daily lives today. It applies to our political environment, to the economic environment, what's happening to our money, what's happening in our school system, what's happening in these foreign wars that aren't really serving our interests. What's going on, with the school shootings and these kids that are doing all the shooting are all on SSRI drugs, and media's not reporting it, and we got fake news and fake history. All of that. One way of describing it is that this is all part of the matrix that we live in. We're living in false information or part information. And so the purpose of the Red Pill Expo is to bring together the world-class experts on that topic. And for 2 days, we're just going to be popping red pills all over the place. And so anybody that's anybody that's interested in that, the website to find out about that is redpillexpo.net. redpillexpo.net. So I think that's enough. I could go on, but those three should keep anybody pretty busy for quite a while.
Cool. Mr. Griffin, let me ask you this. Well, of course, we don't let you talk about anything you want to. So anytime you want to jump into what you'd like to maybe speak on, please do.
Well, okay, thank you. I'd be glad to do that, but I'm prepared to follow you on your lead. What do you think
can I
want to hear about?
I just want to
Go ahead, Nick.
ask something, because I really did like The Creature from Jekyll Island and the research that was poured into it, which, by the way, you were very nice to autograph for me a couple of years ago when I met you. And but I also... I met you at the Cancer Control Society several years ago.
Oh, okay, good.
And but I also And I thought it was really funny that the subject came up during the question and answer period for this. I was at the premiere of Bill Still's movie about the Federal Reserve also, and he had mentioned that you guys had crossed swords about how to resolve the money issue. And of course, yours is a commodity-backed currency, I believe, and his is just going back to fiat currency. And what I'm trying to figure out here between you and him is you guys did all the same kind of research, but you came to very different conclusions on how to actually fix the problem in it. So, I mean, can you touch on that a little bit?
Well, yes, I think I can. I don't really want to get into a debate or any kind of crossing swords, as you say, with anybody. We do have a different point of view, and I just feel that if you really understand not only the history of who did what, and you realize that, the banks, these big bad banks have been legally plundering us all these years. And if you get into that and you say, well, okay, look at the banks, let's just get rid of the banks. And say, well, we can trust our politicians, our trustworthy politicians, but not those big bad bankers. I think it's a mistake in character analysis. I don't think we can trust the politicians any more than we can trust the bankers. And as a matter of fact, if you look at even our current political and economic history, there's such a merger between the two, you can't tell the difference. Look, who's been Secretary of the Treasury for so many years? It's been somebody from one of the big banks. So what we really have is that the bankers, which some people call the banksters, which I think is pretty good way of describing them, they've really moved into to the regulatory agencies of the government, and you find that in all aspects of our current life. I mean, the people who are running the FDA, for example. Most of those at the top level come from the drug companies. The very industry that the FDA is supposed to be regulating, those are the people that are now running the FDA. And the same thing is true in the field of banking. When you go to an outfit like the Federal Reserve and you realize that, well, it's supposed to be a government agency, but it's really not. When you understand what the Federal Reserve is and how it was created and who did it and all that, you come to the amazing conclusion that it's nothing but a cartel. It's a banking cartel. I mean, it's no different than a banana cartel or an oil cartel. It just happens to be a banking cartel. And so they bought off a lot of politicians way back in 1913, and these politicians voted for the Federal Reserve Act. But if you know how the Federal Reserve Act came into being and who wrote it, all it is a banking cartel agreement between the major banks. So they took their cartel agreement to Congress, and they convinced these congressmen to, they erased the title off the top, which said banking cartel. That's figurative, of course. They had this big fat eraser, said, we can't use that word, banking cartel agreement, and they put in the words Federal Reserve Act. But with that single change, everything else is very purely a cartel agreement. And so they passed it into law. And so we are living under law enforcement to obey the banking cartel agreement. So when you realize that, there's a tendency, as Bill Still has done, to say, well, look, these bankers are bad dudes. Let's get rid of them. Let's take away this power from them and turn it over to those nice, trustworthy politicians. Well, I'm not ready to go down that path at all, because those nice, trustworthy politicians have all been bought off by the banks, and many of them are bankers in disguise. So I look at what the Federal Reserve cartel is doing, what these banks are doing, not so much who is doing it, but what are they doing? And you come to the conclusion that what they are doing is creating money out of nothing, sometimes called fiat money. And when you can do that, you have no limits as to the quantity that can be created. And so they just keep creating more and more and more of it to buy themselves out of the economic jams they get into. Their solution is always, well, we'll just create more money and throw money at it. And it works for a while. The money supply expands and expands and expands some more, which means that the prices of things go up, up, up. And the average person is paying for that in the form of higher prices. It's a tax. It's a hidden tax, really. And so I don't care who is given the power to create money out of nothing, whether they call themselves bankers or whether they call themselves congressmen. I mean, these are the guys, any human being for that matter, most human beings, if you give them the power to make a fortune easily, and everybody will think you're a great guy for doing it because they elected you to office or something, well, that is a temptation that's going to corrupt most people. And throughout history, we can see that that's exactly what happened. And so I conclude from all of this that the evil is not who is creating money out of nothing, but the fact that anybody is given the legal authority to create money out of nothing. So I'm opposed to fiat money. I think that is the root of the problem, not who creates it, but the fact that it is created and enforced upon us by law. That is the problem, and there's the difference of opinion between us.
Right. Now, here's another point that just crossed my mind while when you're speaking is, okay, so the politicians signed into being the Federal Reserve Act, giving us that monstrosity out of New York, and okay, I'll ask the question and we'll have you answer after the break. But I'd like to know, in all your research, where did Congress get the authority to abdicate their responsibility for regulating money and being able to create money?
I'll answer that question when we come back.
Okay.
All right. We're right back with Jekyll Griffin. This is Revolution Radio, the Granada Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, hold on. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hey, welcome back to the Granada Forum radio program. And we got Jekyll Griffin with us. We're going to have him give out his website just one more time, and then he's going to pick up with the question which him and Nick left off on. So, Mr. Griffin, give out your websites real quick, and then you and Nick can get into the question and where it comes from. So,
sure. Okay.
Yeah, please. Yeah, give out your stuff, your numbers.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. Our bookstore site is realityzone.com. Our think tank is Our think tank is freedomforceinternational.org. And our action site right now is to build the Red Pill Expo in Spokane, Washington in June, and that's called redpillexpo.net. So those are the three we were talking about. So back to the question, though, where did Congress get the authority to delegate this power to the Federal Reserve System, which is a banking cartel, a private banking cartel? How come Congress got the authority to delegate that power to the banks? And the answer is they stole it. They invented it. They just usurped it. They didn't have it because the Constitution doesn't give Congress the power to create money out of nothing. You just start off with that. The Constitution is very specific. It was written by a bunch of guys that had just gone through one of the greatest devastating inflationary periods of all history, because when the colonies fought the American Revolution, all of the colonies and the army itself, the national army itself, had created money out of nothing. They were running printing presses in those days. They were printing money, and the Continental Army was running on fiat money, and everybody was forced more or less to accept it because it was their, quote, patriotic duty to do so. And so they all did. And at the end of the war, everybody that had anything was devastated. Their savings were chewed up in inflation. And so when it finally came time to draft the Constitution, and the issue came up about what authority would this new national government have to issue money. Wow, just read the Constitution and read the debates and read the Federalist Papers that all were part of that milieu that went to the creation of the Constitution. And these guys were very clear. They said, we will never, ever allow this national government that we are creating, we will never allow it to issue what they call bills of credit. Well, bills of credit means fiat money. It means money based on debt. It means that you just create it out of, well, actually it's not out of nothing, it's worse than nothing. You create it out of debt, out of IOUs. And so the Constitution is very specific. It says that Congress shall not have the power to issue money based on IOUs, or bills of credit. And so Congress did not have the authority to create fiat money. The only thing in the Constitution that deals with what Congress can do, it says they can issue coin and regulate the value thereof. Coin. And you understand what they meant when they used the word coin in those days. It meant those little shiny pieces of metal. It's not like we can coin the phrase or invent something. Coin in those days meant coins that you spend as money. And so the Constitution says specifically that the federal government shall only have the power to issue coin and to regulate the value thereof. So now we come to this question that was asked: how come the Congress could vote a law, the Federal Reserve Act, voted into being, which gave a group of private banks the authority to do something which Congress itself did not have the authority to do? And so you come back to my answer, which is they just usurped it. They stole it. They just created it. And they did it because they didn't have the power, and nobody was smart enough or courageous enough or whatever you want to call it to challenge them on it. And they still haven't been challenged this day. This issue has never gone to the Supreme Court. Why? Because everybody is afraid of the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve System runs this country. These bankers tell the politicians what to do. It's a joke to think that the federal government is controlling the banks. It's the other way around, folks. That's why this issue has never been challenged in the courts. And as long as the present system that we have, and with all these congressmen and senators totally afraid of the power of the Federal Reserve System, as long as that exists, nothing is going to change. So that's the unhappy answer to your question, is that Congress did not have that power.
Yeah. And was there going to be a happy answer to it?
It depends on the American people. I think there can be, but most people walking up and down the streets have no knowledge of what we're talking about. Right. Unfortunately, many of them have no interest in it either. But if they only knew that their whole lives depend upon this, their future lives especially, the economic sphere is how governments can control people today. They control people by determining what the value of their money is. They control people by how much money they can get, how much they can keep, how much is taken away from them through taxes. All of these things affect our lives in profound ways. And so even though the person, the gum-chewing public is saying, I don't care about the Federal Reserve, what's that got to do with me? Well, it has everything to do with them. And once we can get people to understand that their lives are on the stake, and their liberties and their well-being, their standard of living, their very freedoms, actually, if they understand that the whole enchilada is at stake, well, then we have a chance of bringing about reform. So our first step in this process is educational.
Right. Now, here's another one, because I was living in California up until last year, and I remember the last governor's race when we had actually a pretty decent guy who was running, Tim Donnelly, who was in the assembly at the time. He's running for the governorship. Now, what did you think about the choice that actually got to run off against Jerry Brown when it was Neil Kashkari, of all people?
Well, to tell you the truth, I really didn't follow that very carefully. This is probably not something I should say, but it's true. I really don't have much interest in politics at that level, because as long as I see that the political landscape is pretty well painted between Republicans and Democrats, and it's dominated by the two major political parties, I really don't feel very good about worrying about it, because I know that both parties really are different branches of the same party.
Yeah, they're flip side. They're the flip side of the same coin.
They really are. It's a game that they play, and they play it very well. They get most of the voters all whipped up. Well, who are you going to vote for? Are you going to be a Republican or a Democrat? They don't really care. They go back and forth to give the voters the feeling that they're participating in their own political destiny. But in fact, it makes no difference because, as you can see plainly, in the last 80 or 100 years, our foreign policy, our financial policy, all the great policies of the nation have not changed. I don't care which party is in office. The rhetoric changes, the campaign promises change. Some of the some acts of Congress come down the line, and then the next time they're reversed. Nothing really changes. And so I really don't waste a lot of time looking at candidates like that, because I know as long as they're endorsed by one of the major political parties, probably that's not going to make too much difference.
Well, what I found interesting with Neil Kashkari was, and I knew who he was before he announced his bid for the governorship. He was sitting in front of Congress being grilled by Alan Grayson out of Florida on how he engineered $700 billion in bailouts to the banks back in 2007, 2008.
Yeah, I think I saw that query on the internet.
Right.
Grayson really pinned him to the wall, and he sort of slithered out of it, didn't he?
Oh yeah, he did. And then he got his reward after the governor's race, because he became the president of I believe it's the Missouri Federal Reserve Bank. Mm-hmm. So. And I kept asking people, how do you not know this? I mean, you got to be paying attention a little bit closer.
Yeah.
But
well, you see, it's not the information we're talking about here is really not found in the major news media,
right?
Or if it is, you can't understand it. It's filled with gobbledygook and has a spin on it, so it comes out sounding, "Oh my goodness, isn't this wonderful?" When in fact it's horrible. So, yeah, I can understand why the average person who trusts, why should the average person not trust the major media? I mean, after all, NBC, CBS, they're the big news services. Surely they wouldn't be biased, would they?
Oh, no, of course not.
Of course not. So that's our problem. We have too much respect and awe for authority. And I say that carefully choosing my words, because I think in this real world of today, we need to question authority. Authority usually comes with great power and money control. And those who have control over money and political power tend to be very corrupted. At least they're corruptible. It's hard to be in positions of great power without yielding to the corruption to benefit yourself.
Right.
And so authorities traditionally are pretty corrupt people, but yet the average person, we're taught in school, respect authority, follow the rules, stay in line, don't question the teacher, and all of that sort of thing. And we just carry that into our personal lives after we get into the real world out of school, and we just think, well, if somebody's got a badge or a stethoscope around their neck, or they got a diploma on the wall, we better listen to what they say, because they're probably right, and we don't know. That's how it works.
Right. It's what was the analogy I think somebody had said for that one? The bucket of crabs. When one tries to leave, the other crabs will pull them back down to get them in line, or something to that effect. I
hadn't heard that, but that sounds about right.
Yeah, but and it seems like the people are busy watching mainstream media news, and they never report on anything. And I remember when I was in college, I had to do an analysis of news reporting. So I had to sit down and watch the news from end to end and write down what they were talking about. And I did it again recently. I didn't actually write it down, but I watched what they were talking about. It's more than 50% of what they're reporting on now is entertainment. Mm-hmm. Unless there's a car chase in LA, which is, can be considered entertainment for California anyway, but it's always entertainment news. It's like, okay, what's this celebrity doing? What's this other celebrity doing? What other movie's coming out? And I'm like, I think I got into it once with the entertainment reporter on Channel 11 in Los Angeles when she was reporting something that was completely so unimportant, it was stupid. So I sent her an article, about something that was going on in the Middle East, some kind of mass slaughter that was happening over there. And she says, I was hired as an entertainment reporter. So I sent her a message back, says, isn't that a little redundant for that show?
Yeah. Well, right. Well, yeah, entertainment or fascination, I guess you might also call it that. People are fascinated by a car chase. I mean, I can't walk by a television set and ignore it if there's a car chase going on. And I know that it doesn't really affect my life, but it's fascinating. And if you're driving down the highway and there's an accident, everybody slows down to look at it. So it's fascination. It's almost like hypnosis. And that's what they're using, that aspect of human nature, to keep the population pretty well focused away from the real issues.
Yeah, bread and circuses, and that's when I like watching car chases because I always want to see what's going to happen at the end of them. But it's not the dominating factor of anything that I do. I don't sit there and look out for these things, and I don't care what the next movie's going to be. Even though I worked in the entertainment industry, I don't care what the next television show that's coming on air is going to be. Yeah. I got other things that I'm reading, and quite a bit of it, believe it or not, a long time ago when I actually first started reading into all this stuff, when I started doing the research and everything, your book and your website were some of the very early on places that I would go to and start picking it all up. And when I was reading Creature from Jekyll Island, I think I had 2 hamsters on the wheel running as fast as they could at that point when I was going through it. I couldn't put the book down. I had to really sit back and go, my God, really? And how come nobody else knows this?
Yeah. Well, I went through that same experience as I was reading and researching that. I mean, I had never heard any of that stuff in school. Well, of course, to be honest with you, I was like the very people I'm talking about. I didn't have much interest in it either at that stage of my life. I didn't realize that anything really important was happening out there. I thought my future was all taken care of. I lived in the best country in the world, right? We had freedom and freedom of speech, right? And we were protected by our authorities who had our best interest, right? All of these things. I didn't realize how wrong I was. And I didn't have much interest in it. It was all taken care of. I just wanted to go on and make some money and enjoy life and play with my toys and, all that stuff. But boy, once you understand what's really happening in the world, things change. And all of a sudden you just can't waste your life looking at these fascinating things for very long.
No, because there are things that I really do like to do, very much away from the political field and away from all this other anti-New World Orders things. And it was Wendy that actually got me on this radio show to begin with. But the problem is that once you do wake up to it, you can't go back to sleep again.
No, once you get out of the box, you can't go back.
I can't. I've tried to climb back in the box. I can't do it. I always wind up back here doing this and doing more research and everything else. Everything just keeps leading me to it. And I don't mind it so much, but it almost becomes obsessive in a way because I just want to know more. And I'll take the information from anywhere that's credible and keep pounding on it. And like I said, you were one of the first that got me into it when I was reading your research materials and everything else.
Well, it's true. Once you learn something important like that, you just can't unlearn it. I like to think of it, that saying is that once the bell is rung, it cannot be unrung.
Uh-huh.
And, once you know, you can never not know again. And if it's something critically important that affects your life and your future, and the future of your family and your community and your whole country, maybe the whole world, and you realize the magnitude of this thing, I suppose not everybody responds to it, but there are some of us that just have that gene, I guess, that we just have this feeling that we have to do something about it.
Right.
And you don't need everyone. One of the things it took me a long time to learn is that I'm not too concerned anymore about the guy next door cutting his grass. Good guy, who doesn't really get it and doesn't want to get it, doesn't care, doesn't know what you're even talking about. I used to worry a lot about that because I thought, if we can't get the guy next door, and I'm just using that as a figure of speech, of course, if we can't get everybody, 51% of the population aware, we're going to lose this battle. And then I finally realized, no, that's not how it works at all. What really happens in history is that all great movements of history have been created and led by a very small minority. Almost always less than 1% of the population, and often 1% of 1% of the population. It's true throughout history. And the masses will follow the leaders and the winners. You take our American Revolution as a great example. Here we have one of the greatest changes in political history right here where we live. We benefited from it. And you know how many people were actually leaders and participated in the American Revolution? It was less than 1% of the population. And within that group, there was a very small group, maybe 20 or 30, who were the real thought leaders, and the Jeffersons and the Hamiltons, and the Franklins. Count them. How many people signed the Declaration of Independence? Altogether, I'm going to guess there was maybe 100 people that led the entire American Revolution. And so here we have the example that makes me feel a lot better today, because what we really need are just a few people. Like the Marines say, we're just looking for a few good men. Well, that's really what is true. We're looking for a few good men and women who understand what the battle is all about and are willing to dedicate their lives to bringing about reform. And if we can organize a force along those numbers and that kind of dedication, we can overcome this opposition, because it too it rests on 1/10 of 1% of the population.
Okay, now, because there is such a movement, especially along the establishment, to try to keep everybody in line and make sure that they only follow what they want to know. I'm very Orwellian the way they're doing it.
Yeah.
But I have also heard other people who are going to another extreme where they're saying, okay, we're going to get into a civil war because we're not being listened to and we're being overrun. Now, I just want to know what your take on that part of it is.
Well, this is a very touchy subject, because what I have to tell you there is my honest opinion, and it upsets some people, but I have to be honest about it. I think that our enemies are doing everything they can to create the semblance of a civil war. I don't think there's any kind of natural force there for that. It's all orchestrated. It's all theater. If you look at the Antifas out there and, the Black Lives Matter and all these violent groups that are so much in the forefront, you turn on your television set and that's all you see. People, throwing firebombs, breaking windows, cursing, yelling, screaming, beating up on sofa. But that's just like a little window you're looking through. It's a little television set window. That's where the media comes in to try and convince all of the viewers, millions and hundreds of millions of people, that this is happening all over the United States, and it's not. These are staged events. Whenever you look at one of these events, what the cameras don't show you, if they just pan over about 30 degrees, you would see all those buses lined up on a side street. And nobody ever questions, well, wait a minute, where did those buses come from? Who paid for those buses? Did those people, where did they come from? They were hired, we find out. Oh, they're being paid. Almost all of them are getting paychecks. They're getting food. They're probably getting some pot, some drugs. They're having a good time while they're going. Some of them are professional agitators and leaders, and the money comes from the George Soros organizations and some from the deep state. But this is all theater. This is not really grassroots America. But what they're trying to do is entice real people out into the streets. They're trying to make them angry and get so fed up with what they see on television that they're hoping some rednecks are going to get out there and really start killing people and creating real bloodshed, and make it spontaneous for a change, really not orchestrated but real. And then what their plan is to move in and close this all down with martial law. Their real end game is not civil war, but they want the appearance of civil war to justify martial law. once they institute martial law, their intent is never to let go of it. And they're hoping that the average American will be so grateful. They say, oh, my goodness, isn't it wonderful that we have these police roaming the streets now in the Army and maybe some blue helmets from the United Nations over here helping us? Isn't this good that we have martial law? Because, boy, it sure was scary before that. This is the end game that is unfolding. And so when we talk about civil war, we have to recognize that it's not genuine. It's orchestrated, and it's being forced upon us by our enemies.
Okay. Now, some of the other things that you get into, aside from political analysis and money analysis, you also deal a lot with the cancer issue. I saw you speak at the Cancer Control Society some years ago, and you had talked about Laetrile. You have videos, I guess they're documentaries, World Without Cancer, documentaries about Max Gerson and his diet. I guess it's a diet that he had he actually found cured cancer, and of course he got buried by Big Pharma and the government.
Well, I might interrupt there. Gerson, he had a diet. It was a natural diet, almost all raw vegetables and some fruits and no meat. Right.
So, I mean, in your research, and aside from the research and the information that you put out, what kind of there's got to be some kind of pushback on it, because I know that you go into a doctor's office and you bring this up and they look at you like you're from outer space.
Well, that's true. Well, you can't blame them, because they've spent all their lives living in a world that is dominated by the pharmaceutical industry. Most doctors don't realize that their curricula, which they went through, was prepared by the pharmaceutical industry. That they don't realize that the great teaching institutions are all funded by money primarily from the pharmaceutical industry. They don't realize that the textbooks that they study were written by people who are on the payroll of the pharmaceutical industry. They don't realize that. And so they're very bright guys, and they learn some great stuff, and there's nothing that can beat modern medicine when it comes to physical trauma. But when it comes to chronic metabolic diseases, like diabetes and cancer and all that stuff, degenerative diseases, the treatment of choice always is pharmaceutical drugs. That's the primary thing, and that's because the doctors have been trained. That's primarily all they're trained to do. I would say all, but maybe 80% of their total training has to do with drugs. And so when you go to a doctor that comes out of these great medical schools, as I say, they're very smart guys. No dummy is going to get through that school. But they're so imbued with pharmaceutical drugs that I don't care what you go to for it, to get a hangnail, a headache, I don't care. You're going to walk out of there with a prescription for a drug. And they say, well, if this doesn't work, come back and we'll give you a prescription for some other drug. So this is the treatment of choice in modern medicine, is all pharmaceutical drugs. And sure, the doctors look at you like you're some kind of a wacko, because that's not what their training is. And just like everybody else, they've been taught to respect authority. So they think that the textbooks and the teachers, whoever taught them what medicine is all about, those are the authorities. And so they respect that. They don't question it. And part of the training is to beware of those quacks who are going around eating things from nature. They have these silly ideas that herbs can be beneficial, or that apricot seeds can cure cancer and so forth. They laugh at that, only because they don't understand the science behind it. Now, I've had the great experience of watching many doctors go through the awakening of realizing, oh my gosh, they said, everything I learned in school, well, not everything, but much of what I've learned in school was wrong. And it's a painful transition to watch a doctor like my good friend John Richardson, who was an MD up in the San Francisco area, make that transition. And, of course, he wound up saving lives because he was using natural treatments for cancer, but they came down on him because he was not using an approved drug. So anyway, it's painful to watch good doctors go through that transition where they realize that they've been on the wrong track, and when they try to get on the right track, of course, the establishment comes down against them. The authorities come down against them and try and force them back into line. So anyway, yeah, that's a field in which I have a great interest, and it's another one of those areas I knew nothing about when I started. I just figured that I was healthy because I was lucky, and boy, if I ever got sick, then I'd go to a doctor and just do whatever the doctor says without realizing that the medical profession is a business. It's a business model, and I've since learned from people who have been in it, who've come out of it, sort of whistleblowers, you might say. They've abandoned it, and they say, look, the whole business model of modern medicine is not to cure anything, but to treat everything, to treat it and to keep you on the treatment forever, because that's profitable. If we cure a disease or something and you're all cured, then we can't sell you any more drugs. So the object is to sell you some kind of a prescription that you have to keep taking daily or weekly for the rest of your life. That's what the modern medical profession is really based upon, that model. They're not interested in cures. They're interested in maintenance. So once you learn that, there goes another red pill. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. And those are the things we'll be talking about, by the way, at the Red Pill Expo coming up next month in Spokane. Right. There are plenty of red pills like that.
Right, but you not even so much the doctors, I think, but you got to really kind of question the people that go in for the treatments, especially when it's cancer treatments, because every single time all they recommend is chemo and radiation, and even to scratching the surface of that whole notion. Okay, chemotherapy is a poison that you put in your body, which was, from what I understand, came out of using mustard gas back in World War I.
That's true. Yeah, it was a toxic substance, and they found out that it killed cancer cells also. Well, right. It kills all cells.
Right.
Chemotherapy is based on...
It kills everything.
Yeah, it kills any cell, but the idea is it kills the cells that are fast reproducing. It kills them quicker because they're reproducing quicker. So since cancer cells are usually rapidly multiplying cells, the idea is that these toxic substances will kill the cancer cells before they kill the non-cancer cells. It's kind of a nip and tuck game, Let's hope we can kill the cancer before we kill the patient. And often really, that's really it.
Right.
And often they lose that race. Well, often the patient dies from the chemotherapy and not the cancer.
Right. Yeah.
I think the patient dies a lot of the times.
Yeah, but not only that, but okay. So number one, their recommendations for treating cancer is, number one, inject your body with poison, and number two, dose you with radiation. Which, if you look into it just a little bit, you find out that radiation causes cancer.
Yeah. Yep,
so
that's right.
I mean, this is what they're giving people.
Yeah, I know. Well, there again, you're back to sort of a similar argument. It's a risk-reward ratio. They say, yeah, of course radiation causes cancer, but we're focusing it right on this cancer cell here. So it kills. It causes cancer, yes, but it also burns cancer tissue to a crisp. So we know they say, they don't say it quite openly, but they're thinking, yes, we know that this is dangerous. We know this can cause and does cause cancer to tissues around it. But if we can just focus it right on that cancer cell, we'll get rid of the cancer, and maybe we won't create cancer. That's
that's a very convoluted logic right there.
I know, God. Don't go there.
It's amazing. I mean, the medical profession will dump all over things like medical marijuana, the CBD oils, which have been been shown that they do fight cancer. They've been dumped all over Max Gerson's diets, which, from what I understand, he was taking in stage 4 cancer patients and curing them. And all these other natural treatments that get, you tell this to a doctor and they look at you like you just spoke Greek to them.
I know. Well, it's true you have, because first of all, most doctors haven't heard this. And secondly, those that have heard it from the authorities who have told them that this is garbage, that this is quackery. And so they have no reason to question it. That they just come out of the shell believing that this is quackery. And so naturally, they're well-intentioned people. If you believed that something was quackery, wouldn't you be opposed to it, even if you were misinformed? As long as you thought it was quackery, why, of course, you'd have to react that way. And so, a lot of these doctors are not bad people. I'm here to let's set that straight. They die from cancer like everybody else, and their families die from cancer. In fact, doctors have a higher rate of cancer than non-doctors. Interesting in itself. I think it's because they're around such toxic materials most of their lives, and a lot of them around radiation equipment.
Right.
But anyway, that is a fact that doctors have a higher incidence of cancer than non-doctors, and they have a higher incidence of ill health, actually. Anyway, that's another issue. We could talk about that. But the fact is that they're not deliberately suppressing treatments or cures for diseases, or especially cancer, because they themselves are victim to that. So they're operating out of conviction, sincere conviction, most of them. So the question is not are these good guys or bad guys. The question is, what's the system that produces this sort of thing? That's what we have to work on.
Right. Like every other week, if you look at watch television ads, there's a new pill for something, and it's like, well, you want to cure your baldness, take this pill. If you want to cure, ED, take this pill. If you want to do this, take this pill. By the way, and then the fast part of the commercial goes by. By the way, here's all the side effects.
Yeah.
This. Yeah. And the last one that they always mention is, and death.
And death, yeah.
It's like, why do I want to take okay, I got a bald spot on my head. Why do I want to take a pill that's going to kill me just to cure a bald spot?
Yeah.
So the pharmaceutical company, they've got to have such a heavy hand in lawmaking to get some of the laws that are getting passed. And
well, you hit it right upon it. That's part of our problem.
Right.
The pharmaceutical industries, I think, spends more on lobbying than any other industry, except maybe military arsenals, military production. Between those two, that's why governments are totally beholden to those two industries. We've been warned about the military-industrial complex. Well, we should be warned about the pharmaceutical health complex, too, for the same reason. Because these giant industries have so much money. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year influencing legislation. And it's the legislation that prevents the average person from having freedom of choice. You cannot choose what you want in the way of health care, because it probably, if you want it, it may come from nature. And if it comes from nature, it can't be patented. If it can't be patented, nobody's going to spend $200 million testing it so it can get clearance from the FDA. And if it doesn't get clearance from the FDA, it's considered as a non-proven drug. And if it's a non-proven drug, you can't use it. You see, that's how that works. So nothing from nature will ever be approved through our system because it'll never have been successfully tested. That's the system that we're facing. And as long as we have that, some of the best medications in the world, which come from nature, will never be legally available to the average person. You have to go to the underground, the black market to get it.
Right. Well, I think Monsanto is still trying, regardless. But, well, even they just got dealt a little bit of a blow, too. The India just outlawed them patenting seeds, so Monsanto's pretty much out of there at this point. But touching on that, genetically modified, they keep saying that they're harmless at this point, but we honestly really don't even know what the real effects are because there's not been any long-term studies on them. So
yes, there have, but they've been buried. See, that's the thing. Every once in a while you read the newspaper and say, oh, well, this company, chemical company or this drug company, we found out that they had something on the market, whether it's Roundup Ready or whether it's some drug that they've been feeding to kids. And they said, well, look, the studies, initial studies showed that these things were deadly, but they buried the results and they concealed it. It's not that they don't have the studies. They hide the studies that show how dangerous these things are because it's a business model. We're back to that again. So eventually it leaks out. Thousands of people have been killed. Tens of thousands have suffered terribly. And so they go to court and by golly, those big companies, they'll pay. They wind up with a $20 million fine, right? We showed those companies $20 million fine. That's nothing. That's peanuts. That's like paying a janitor to clean up the floor for those companies. To them, it's just the cost of doing business. You know, this is something that people have got to understand. These things we're talking about affect their lives.
Okay, because I thought that they hadn't done any really long-term study. I know they had done short-term studies, but I didn't know that the long-term studies even existed.
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. I think that is true in some cases, but they didn't do long-term studies because they didn't want to.
Right.
Yeah,
and of course
they're expected to do long-term studies, but they just instinctively know from the short-term studies what the long-term studies are going to do, so they just don't do them.
Right, and then you got companies like Monsanto who somebody came out with a report about their plants, which made their own pesticides, were killing off the bees. Monsanto bought the company and buried the report.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There was another guy, I think he was in Michigan, who actually created, through cross hybridization of his bees, created bees that were actually Roundup resistant, or the pesticide resistant bees. They could actually go onto Monsanto's pesticide producing crops and be perfectly fine. The Department of Natural Resources came in and destroyed all his beehives and killed all the queens. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, they don't want people to be healthy. I mean, there really is this whole culture within, I think, especially the pharmaceutical industry. They don't want anybody to be healthy. They'll lose all their customers. But there's this other thing where they're paying so many people off that everybody's getting sick. And I've walked around Los Angeles and one time, and I was just kind of just observing people. People did not look healthy. They did not look well. And then you're talking about a state where the sun shines all the time, so they got plenty of vitamin D. There's plenty of food there that's actually pretty good for you. And these people just did not look well.
And they are not well.
Right.
For the most part, they are not well. Just take a look at any major airport. Locate the place where they park the wheelchairs. The last time I saw a collection of those in Los Angeles airport, I've forgotten where it was, but I just happened to go down a little corridor that wasn't often traveled. I think I was looking for the men's room or something, and I found this. There must have been 300 wheelchairs just sort of stacked up. That doesn't count the ones that are already being pushed around the airport. These were just spares. Can you imagine that many wheelchairs being necessary, say, 20 or 30 years ago?
Oh, God, no.
No.
No. I was alive 20, 30 years ago, so I do remember that even then people were still getting up and walking around.
Yeah.
But
when people are living longer, I understand by the statistics, if you can trust the statistics, which is, pardon my skepticism, but that's a good question. Can you trust the statistics? But assuming you can, they may be living longer, but the quality of life is definitely lower.
Mm. Yeah. Now, one of the other things I want to get into while we still have our time left is I think it was a while ago you worked with Michael Murphy on his chemtrails movies.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so I'd like to get what your take is on it, because I've met Michael Murphy, I've interviewed him, and I thought his movies were really great and everything. So what is your take on the whole chemtrail situation? Do you know what but I mean, aluminum, barium, strontium, we know, and I've also heard that they're also putting lithium in there now as well. But how do you try to get somebody, when they look, even can see the evidence right in front of their eyes, how do you get them to understand what is actually going on?
Well, we've already covered that. Is because they trust the authorities. And the authorities say, oh, that's just nothing but, just contrails, just condensation of moisture. That's natural phenomenon. Don't worry about it. That's silly. These guys that worry about these things are crazy. That's why. It's because people, they believe the authorities. That's half of our problem right there.
Yeah, but
they would just look, and they would just look and compare what their own memories, produced like 20 years ago. There were plenty of jets flying around then, but they weren't like this. They would just realize that, condensation of moisture on a cold day, you can see it coming out of your mouth. It may drift for maybe a couple of feet, and then it's absorbed into the air. Can you imagine that you're breathing this little fog of cold, moist, cloudy air on a cold day, and no matter how far you walk, it just remains behind you for a mile? No, this is not cold moisture freezing into little ice crystals. This is something that's suspended in the air. And of course, the scientific tests show that these chemicals you mentioned are showing up in huge quantities in places where it's not found in the environment. And the only place it could be coming from is from the sky. And then the naysayers say, oh, yeah, well, it's coming from China. The wind is blowing all this stuff over from China where they have terrible pollution. That's where it's coming from. So there's always some kind of an explanation that they throw up. And if the person listening says, well, yeah, I want to believe the authorities because I don't want to think I have a problem. I don't want to think that there are authorities who would do something bad. So they choose the explanation they want to hear.
Right, but then there's also the other aspect of it, because I guess some years ago you put out a call for people to track airplanes and watch the airplanes taken off to and from the airport, and I lived near several of them, so I could actually watch them on the plane tracker and then give you the information on which planes you could see and which ones you couldn't. And of course, all airplanes have to have an identifying tracker on them. That's how you identify them. And the ones that were spraying were not being identified on plane tracker. And
that's interesting, because I did the same thing, and most of them that I saw with the trails were identified on plane tracker.
Oh, really? I was getting the opposite out of it.
Really? That's interesting. What airport were you near, or what?
Burbank Airport.
Burbank. Burbank. Well, I don't know about Burbank. That's interesting. But the ones I tracked were some here in Thousand Oaks, where I live, and then I spent some time looking at them up in the Paso Robles area, Carmel, Paso Robles, and there's a flight path right between Los Angeles and San Francisco. And zoom, away they go. I mean, it must be, I don't know, I'm going to guess at least 80 flights or 100 flights a day, all follow the same track one way or the other. Mm-hmm. And I found that most of them were identified as regular commercial airlines, United Airlines, American Airlines, and so forth.
Yeah, those ones I would get. Those ones I would show up in, because I lived in a part of the San Fernando Valley where planes going from LAX up north would fly pretty much nearby, where you could actually see them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them I would pick up, and then you'd see one shooting a trail up behind it, and it would not show up on plane tracker.
Mm-hmm. Well, not all planes are required to have their transcodes. As you know, of course, military planes don't, and private planes don't.
Actually, military planes do.
Well, they're not the kind that you pick up on.
No, well, maybe not on the civilian, but I know for a fact, because I was in the military, worked on airplanes. They have what's called an IFF device inside, so that if they're coming in, they can be identified.
Right. Well, but the codes we're talking about are commercial identification. It's a different frequency, different program. So, well, anyway, the reason I found that interesting, and interesting as I backed off of it, is because it led to an interesting controversy, and that is that many people were saying that these planes producing the trails had to be tankers. Well, I found out that is not true, because the ones that I spotted had passengers on board. So that told me that the origin of these trails didn't come from big tanks on board ship. It had to come from some other source. It might have been a mixture of something in with the oil, with the fuel. It might have been something added to the atmosphere that interacted with the moisture from the planes as they passed through at high altitudes, which is a theory that I would like to pursue further. I think it's very plausible. But it definitely wasn't coming, in most cases, the ones I tracked, was not coming from tanker planes.
Right.
So I didn't want to get into the controversy of that because I don't know enough about the chemistry of the fuel to really carry on a debate. So until I learn more about the chemistry of this fuel and how it could be mixed with something without affecting the efficiency of the fuel and all of that, I just thought I'd better back away from it and let the experts talk about it.
Okay. Nick, did anyone ask anybody in the chat room, if anybody on listening with us live wants to ask a question to Mr. Griffin?
I got nobody in the chat room asking much at this point.
Is there anybody you'd like to ask a question who's listed that we've called, or no, or John, or anybody? Al?
I don't think John's on.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Griffin. What do you think, real quick, about the economy, even though we've been talking about chemtrails? But my question to you might be, well, where do you think the economy is right now with all the, things going on with the lying of the Russian gate and all that garbage? But what do you think the economy lies right now?
Well, I have to warn everybody that might be listening that my opinion on this isn't worth very much. Because,
thank you.
Because I have been predicting doom and gloom on the economy for a long, long time, and it hasn't happened. And that doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means it didn't happen as soon as I thought it was going to happen.
Right.
It's amazing to me how these guys can keep the economy afloat and keep expanding the economic bubble over and over again. It looks like it's almost going to burst, and then there's a contraction, and then somehow they manipulate public opinion, they calm the fears of the people, and then they start all over again to inflate the bubble some more. And so I've seen that happen about 4 or 5 times. Each time the bubble gets bigger, maybe twice as big as it was before. It's so unbelievably unreal right now that I don't even think it's a bubble. I think it's an illusion. I don't think it's even real. And what I'm saying, I maybe should explain that a little bit more. When we talk about bubbles bursting and markets adjusting back to normal, there's an assumption in that is often unstated, and the assumption is that people are free to act and to react. People are free to take their money out and to put it someplace else. They're free to reinvest it. They're free to do something with it, and they're free to rebuild. But the more and more that the market is controlled and manipulated, the less and less it resembles a free market. And I'm just wondering if maybe we are already living in a world where there is no market anymore. It's all completely controlled and artificially directed. And in other words, are we living in what we used to call the Soviet economic system, where you never had a depression in the Soviet Union because it was illegal. In other words, it was illegal. And anybody that would say that there was a depression would go to prison. Anybody that acted as though there was a depression would go to prison. Anybody that would noticed that there was a depression would go to prison. So you never had a depression because nobody said there was. Even though people were hungry, they were unemployed, and you couldn't buy anything, still everything was good, according to the official reports, because the whole system was a command economy. And now I'm wondering, is it possible that we are in that stage or so close to it right now that that's the reason the bubbles don't burst, is because there aren't bubbles anymore? This is not the answer to your question, but it's to say that if we had a free economy and people were free to react and do what they wish, and if the markers of the economy were honest, in other words, if the Federal Reserve and some of the larger banks were not deliberately buying up stocks to push their prices up so that the stock market rallies and has a higher value, and everybody says, "Oh, good. See, we don't have a depression. Look, the stock market is up." What they don't realize is the reason it's up is because the Federal Reserve and the banks are creating money out of nothing and buying the stock to force up the price. It's not it's not really happening. It is an illusion. So I think that's part of it, and I don't know how much validity there is to the real market, whether we will. I almost hope we have a collapse, because if we don't have a collapse, we could never have a recovery. It just means we're stuck in the tyranny of a command economy forever.
Well, here's the thing, too. I think it was back in either 2000 or 2001, Ron Paul was talking about market corrections, and that the market was going to end up having what he called a market correction, which was the collapse back in 2007, 2008.
Yes.
One of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons I left California was because I was watching the exact same thing happening there recently, and I didn't want to get caught up in it again. And it just seems to me like this time it's a lot bigger than it was before. And even Ron Paul has said that this next time the market corrects itself, it's going to make the 2008 collapse look like a picnic. I just wonder what your take on that is.
Well, yeah, that's been my prediction every time the bubble got to that point, that it was larger than the previous one. I thought, boy, this is going to be the big pop. And I agreed with Ron Paul when he made that statement. But it didn't really pop that badly. I mean, a lot of speculators lost on real estate, and there were some job losses and people had to contract. But it was, we didn't have food marches in the streets or anything like that.
No. But the thing is that they're still starting. They're doing the same thing again that they did before. They're starting to make risky loans again. The banks are, and we haven't seen the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall, which separated the investment banks from the savings banks. So of course they're playing games with other people's money, like Ron Paul called it the moral hazard, and it just seems like they're gearing up for another collapse. Only the next time it happens, it could be monumental the next time it happens, and yet nobody seems to be paying attention to it again. Again, it's a whole thing. It's like, how come nobody is paying attention to this? And the only reason I even keep saying that is because I don't consider myself to be like the most brain cell person on the planet. I'm not Albert Einstein by any stretch of the imagination. But if I can get it, how come nobody else can?
Well, plenty of people get it. That's the fact. But the average person depends on authority. Again, we're back to that. And the authorities are not expressing any, I won't even say concern. They're not expressing any interest in it. They just don't want people to think about it. And if people don't think about it, there's a greater chance that they can prolong it, you see.
Right.
And I think that's the game. They're trying to prolong it as long as they can and put off the consequences.
Mr. Griffin, we want to thank you for your time, and check out realityzone.com. That's realityzone.com, and Freedom Force International.
Right.
We want to thank you again for being on. This was great. We thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Well.
See you next week, everybody.